Reagan and I am back with a fun tag video today. Actually a bit of a retro tag video today because this is something that was created, I don't know, 4-5 years ago now, and it's just one that I realized that I never got around doing, and I loved watching it at the time, so I figured, you know, why not? I'm an old booktuber at this point. I'm basically ancient, so why not dig something up from the past? I'm a relic. You know, whatever. We're going to be doing the Reader Problems book tag. This basically is just a collection of questions, and it asks and inquires, what do you do when faced with a very well-known and often felt reader problem? So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first question is, you have 20,000 books on your TBR. How in the world do you decide what to read next? So this is an interesting question, and I think the ultimate conundrum, if you will, but I am both equal parts a list maker and a mood reader. So I try to marry these two things together every single month and kind of try to live my best life with that. Obviously, I am also of the belief of like, just read whatever sounds right in the moment. I obviously love the formality of a list. Making a TBR every month is actually one of my favorite reading activities. Analyzing, looking at my bookshelves and figuring out what I think is what I'm gonna be in the mood for the month is like a fun game. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, and that's okay. I think that's the important piece. Like, if you're a list maker, just try to remember that you don't have to live and die by said list. You can, you know, win your list because you were totally right, or if you just guessed totally wrong and ended up wanting to read a bunch of other stuff, just read what you feel like reading ultimately. That's what's important. That being said though, to answer the question of how I figure out what to read next, I kind of just like look inside and decide, you know, what sounds right. Generally, I can just assume that it's some sort of fantasy. I read almost exclusively fantasy, so I kind of try to look at my shelf like, what series have I not read? What has good reviews? I've recently been on a roll with series, so if there's a book that I enjoyed the previous month that has a sequel, I try to almost immediately jump into that sequel. Otherwise, I'll let too much time pass and I'll forget stuff. So I just am currently really trying to just focus on what I want to read. But a lot of it is just like staring at my bookshelf. What are other people reading? Just seeing what sparks my interest. Then I construct a list from there. And that's kind of how I decide. But yeah, that's it. Question 2 is, you're halfway through a book and you are not loving it. Do you quit or do you stay committed? I am of a big standpoint of totally quit that book. Honestly, if you're not liking it, like, what is the point of forcing yourself to continue to read something that you're just simply not enjoying? Life is too short to read and consume mediocre things. If you're not having fun, go home. If you don't want to be there, leave. If you don't want to finish that book, put it aside. Give it to someone else who wants to read it. I do not have time to just finish stuff for the sake of finishing it. No, no, no. No Goodreads goal is worth that. Speaking of Goodreads goals, question 3 is, the end of the year is coming and you're so close but so far away in your Goodreads challenge. Do you try to catch up, and how? So again, just like how I kind of like to approach lists, goals are also something that I find to be really fun, but I always try to keep in mind that, again, don't live and die by the goal or the TBR that you set for yourself, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal if you fail your Goodreads goal by 5 books. Like, obviously it's really fun to challenge yourself, but it's always important to kind of keep it in a healthy mindset. That being said, if I'm behind on my Goodreads goal, I don't really do anything. Like, obviously I always try to challenge myself to read as much as possible, so I'll have the mindset of like, hey, maybe I'll try to read 1 or 2 more books a month, but I'm not gonna like cancel plans or isolate myself to try to complete my Goodreads goal in December. Like, it's the holidays, I'm gonna hang out with my family. I also am not the person who will just read a bunch of short books at the end of the year to try to catch my Goodreads goal. Like, I always want to just read what I feel like, and that's usually very long fantasy. But that is a good tip. If you want to beat your Goodreads goal, just read like 10 graphic novels at the end of the year. You'll catch up really fast. But yeah, I don't really do anything. I just kind of like say la vie. There's always next year. Question 4, the covers of a series you love do not match. How do you cope? Again, it's obviously really nice when a series matches and is really coordinated, but you know, you digress. Like, they tend to look nice. But as a tip to try to deal with this, if you personally do not like this and you cannot stand it, I recommend doing 2 things. first one is to look into international versions, particularly like the UK generally has beautiful editions. I sometimes just buy the UK editions because I prefer them, and they could at a very high likely match, unlike the US versions. Or two, if you have a bunch of unmatching series and that bothers you, you can make a rainbow out of your shelf and it might separate them, so then you don't have to look at them as a whole. But I'll say, I mean, it definitely makes me sad when a series like doesn't follow through and finish. But if the cover change is better than the original, then I'll be like more likely to let it slide. But if it's like a negative change, like if we're getting negative gain here, that's a little unfortunate. And I'm like, that's a little sad, but can't help it. You can't help it. You can't fix what you can't fix. Question 5 is, everyone and their mother loves a book you really don't like. Who do you bond with over shared feelings? This is the best. There's nothing like having that go-to bookish friend who either has like similar opinions or even differing opinions, but you just have a great rapport and you just love talking books, you know what I mean? And like you're open to each other's opinions and you can like know, you also are so familiar with their taste, you can see why they like or dislike something. I would say the person I go to most about books has to be Monica. We constantly chat and we're always like, have you read this? How do you feel about this? Or they'll be like, I heard this is good, but I want to know your opinion about it first for XYZ reasons. It's just always really nice to have someone to like get down to business and chat bookish things with. I'll also say my best friend growing up, Shannon, we have really similar reading tastes, and we'll often read the same books and we'll recommend books to each other, and we generally have the same like differing opinions as well, so that's always really nice. But yeah, I would say those are my two go-to people. Question 6 is, you're reading a book, you're about to start crying in public. How do you deal? If you asked me this 4 years ago, I would have been so embarrassed, like crying in college, and people are like, what's wrong with you? But now, honestly, like, New York has turned me into a new person. I could be on the subway bawling my eyes out. One, people wouldn't even look twice. There's so much weird stuff going on the subway. One weird pale crying girl in the corner. They're like, that's a Tuesday. So yeah, I just feel like, yeah, just let it out. Let the tears flow. Let the rain fall down, if you will. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe as I've gotten older, I've just gotten less embarrassed about things, but also if you're crying in public, people might ask you what's wrong, and then you can recommend the amazing book that made you start crying in the first place. So I feel like that is a potential win. Question 7 is, a sequel to a book that you love just came out, but you've forgotten a lot of the book prior. What do you do? Will you reread, skip the sequel, try to find the synopsis on Goodreads, or cry in frustration? So 2 things I would say about this. One, as I kind of mentioned previously, I'm really pushing myself to just continue on with series once I start them. I have been really good about this year. I've marathoned so many trilogies because of this simple problem, forgetting things between books. I find that like, because I read so often, I forget names, plots, so many things. Just, I do remember like my overall sentiment and feelings and perhaps big things, but those details quickly get lost somewhere in the brain categorization. So one thing I try to do is read things back to back to back if it's a series, but obviously if the book's not out, I am a sucker for spoiler reviews on Goodreads. Those are amazing. Shout out to people who make really in-depth spoiler reviews because they're great refreshers. Or 2, there are people online who do full recaps of books, which I also do. Sometimes if I can't find anything or if I'm too lazy to look up those things, I'll just dive right in and like hope I figure it out as I go, which is not the recommended approach, but sometimes works. Sometimes people have flashbacks. Question 8 is, you don't want anyone borrowing your books. How do you politely tell people nope when they ask? Honestly, I don't tell people no. I get really excited about the prospect of someone reading a book that I love so I can talk to them about it. I also have this like joy of like finding the perfect book for people, like figuring out what they like, what their interests are, what podcasts they listen to, and then finding like the perfect book recommendation. Lend books to friends, coworkers, friends of friends, put them out in the world. More people need to read. This was not always my sentiment. I used to hoard them kind of like a dragon, but now I don't know. I just want more people to like books, so I just I'm like, you want to borrow this? Obviously, like, it's sad when they come back a little damaged, but I would find for the most part, people are really respectful, and I get them back in really good condition. And I also have never had anyone not give it back. Like, it can be like years later, but they always give it back. And again, at the end of the day, like, I'm here to make people read great books. That's my goal in life. That's the joy I have. So that's why I do this anyway. So 9 is reading ADD. You've picked up and put down 5 books in the last month. How do you get over your reading slump? This is tricky. I've definitely been here. I've been here recently. I would say a couple of things. Find a book that perhaps interests you a little bit and just stick to it. Like, don't keep picking up and putting down books. That is always hard, but I always have like a go-to genre that I know is super entertaining and will capture my attention to get me out of a reading slump. That's also what I do very often. Usually angsty, fantasy, paranormal, like something like that I will pick up when I'm feeling a little slumpy, and it always helps me like stay focused, and it's usually super entertaining, and it's so fast paced that it always gets me out of a slump really fast. So I would say like stick to a book or find like that perfect genre for yourself that you can always kind of count on to get you out of a slump. So, you know, doesn't have to be angsty YA paranormal fantasy. That's just mine. But you could also try that. I'd highly recommend it. Question 10, there are so many new books coming out that you're dying to read. How many do you actually buy? This is tricky. I don't know is the answer. I think it depends by how many. I obviously do buy books every month, and I'm lucky enough to get some books in for review, but I tend to try to buy all of my books from like local bookstores and stuff. I really love like treating myself to books every month. I also can say this as someone who has like a full-time job, so I do luckily have like some expendable income that I can comfortably spend on books. So yeah, I don't know, like if there are 10 releases that month that I'm just thrilled about, I'll maybe buy all of them, maybe I'll buy 2 of them. I also think it depends like what's interesting me on my shelf. Like if I feel like I'm really gonna read all 10 of those books in a close together time frame, then yeah, I'd buy them. If I feel like I have a lot to read on my shelf, I'll probably wait to pick up any book until, you know, I feel like I need to fill it in. I also am trying to be a little more mindful about my purchases because of my New York City apartment. I have limited space and I've definitely run out of it. So yeah, that's definitely something I should consider more than I do. Question 11 is, after you've bought the new books you couldn't wait to get to, how long do they sit on your shelf before you read them? Again, a question that varies. I feel like I used to be way worse about this than I am now. I feel like in the past like 5-6 months I've had smaller book hauls, and I've been much better about picking up new series and then reading that whole series through over the course of the few months. Again, trying to be a little more mindful, but obviously it 100% can vary. I have had books on this shelf for years that I really want to read that I just have not picked up. I definitely would say I'm distracted by new and shiny things. So if a book is like 2 months old, like 1 month old that I recently got, I'll be more likely to pick it up. But if it like misses that window, it kind of falls into an abyss and I forget about it for the rest of time. So, yeah. Alrighty guys, that is the Reader Problems book tag. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you soon in another video soon. Goodbye!